The Killing of Bruiser Brody. This was the third episode that Viceland produced in their Dark Side of the Ring series. And I'm interested to see if this is as good as a documentary I saw last year about Bruiser Brody called Wrestling's Last Rebel, which I really enjoyed. So this one starts off with news stories about Brody's murder back in the late 80s, and it's just disgusting. It's fucking infuriating. I'm so mad that this happened. And the fact that there's not been justice, and Jose Gonzalez, that piece of shit who got off, man, I really hope they can one day find justice on that motherfucker and get Carlos Colon too. Fuck him. It's just one of the... Mick Foley is doing the narration for this documentary, and you also have Abdullah the Butcher, Choni Atlas, and Dutch Mantel doing interviews for this. So with the opening, it looks like you're going to have 3 counts of what happened that night. You're going to have Dutch Mantel's, Choni Atlas, and Abdullah the Butcher's. Now we meet Barbara Goodish and Jeff Goodish, who is Bruiser Brody's wife and his son, who... from what I heard, are going to play a big role in this documentary, and I know his son does really well because of how angry he is, and he has every right to be, of the fact that there's still no justice for the Bruiser Brody. So I'm looking forward to hearing their recounts of what happened that night and how they heard about it. We see a lot from his widow and his son, and they're just recounting memories they have of him, and you feel bad for the son because he even says he doesn't have much memories because he was a little kid when it happened, and he has to rely on other people telling him stories about his father. Now we get to when he goes to the Worldwide Wrestling Council, and this is, of course, the most violent territory in the world at this time. It's extremely gross. They're cutting each other open with forks and knives. They're setting themselves on fire. Just how violent the promotion is, and it's shocking for even that time. I'm seeing highlights of Bruiser Brody and Abdullah the Butcher, some of the most violent shit you'll ever see. And one thing they do is, like we're saying, like Bruiser Brody, you can't just paint him as this innocent guy. I mean, he would beat the living shit out of wrestlers, like very violently. He'd fucking beat your ass. And one of the guys who used to beat up really bad was the man who killed him, who is Jose Gonzalez, Invader #1. They even show a part where Choni Atlas is telling a story of when Invader got beat up so bad he had to go to the hospital, and the guy who's driving him to the hospital is Special Delivery Jones, and Jose tells Jones, I'm going to kill that guy one day. So he beat the shit out of him, and Dutch Mantel even says there's something brewing between the two of them and they don't like each other. And we're getting into the reason that he was killed. They're not saying, exactly that day yet, but I think I've always thought about it. Brody wanted to buy into the worldwide, the WWC, whatever you call it. He wanted to buy and become a minority owner, and the Gorilla Monsoon would sell his share to him. I think that was one of the main reasons he was killed. And Dutch Mantel tells a story of supposedly what had happened was Brody, when him and Jose didn't like each other already, and Jose was he had a big job there. And when Brody would get the minority ownership, he was going to get rid of Jose. And Jose's daughter, I believe, had died in a swimming pool accident. She had drowned just 3 months before this happened. So it's obviously his mind's in a horrible place already. And I think that just led more and more to what happened. So we get to what happens. Choni Atlas tells a story really well. He tells a story of Carlos, Jose, and another guy, another part of the owner of the company. They're all in this football huddle position talking, and it's very eerie. Dutch Mantel tells a story of him sitting there and leaving. He goes to the dugout because it wasn't a baseball stadium to see fans come in because it was just really a lot of tension there. And Brody and Choni Atlas are talking. I've heard the story a whole bunch of times. Choni, he's really good at drawing, and Brody asks him to draw a picture of his son. He has a son, so he asks him like a portrait of his son. Brody gets called by Jose to go in the locker. To go into the shower to talk about their match. And Jose takes a knife out, stabs him twice, I believe, and you can hear Choni Atlas talk about it, and when he says he can hear Brody's like a growl, like he thought he'd been punched in the stomach, and he was faced like, whoa, there's gonna be a fight, but no, he was being stabbed. Choni then sees the knife of Jose, and he sprints over and he grabs Brody and he pulls him away. And this knife is so sharp. I didn't hear this story that when he comes down, he cuts off Bruiser Brody's ponytail, but the damage had already been done. He's been stabbed twice in the stomach, and Tony gets him away. He gets him to the ground, and Brody's bleeding. His intestines are out. Tony's trying to save him, and Carlos Colon sees this, and he sprints over and he grabs Jose, puts him, shoves him down, says, "No, Jose, no, Jose." And Tony Atlas is saying, "I'm going to snap your motherfucking neck" to Jose, and he's yelling at Carlos, "I'm going to knock your fucking head off." He's pissed off, as he should be. And what happens is, eventually, Carlos is able to calm him down, and they eventually get the stretcher, and they can't lift up Brody because he's so big. Tony Atlas has to pretty much carry Bruiser Brody to the stretcher, to the ambulance, and they take him away. And Tony goes with them to the hospital, and people are yelling, "Someone stabbed Brody, someone stabbed Brody." So we get to the hospital, and no one's attending Brody. Stabbings are very common there. And eventually, Tony Atlas pretty much has to carry, he grabs a doctor, takes him to the room Brody's in, and he tells him to look at him. And when Tony's taking off Brody's shoes, he sees that his feet are now blue, which, if you know anyone that's dying, that's a sign. And he gets so mad, the doctors eventually come in, and, Atlas is so mad, he punches a hole right into the wall because he's so pissed off at the situation. And now we get Abdullah the Butcher's, his perspective on what happened. Tony Atlas tells the story of, Brody had 2 8-inch stab wounds. Holy fuck, that knife was sharp. And it slit his liver, and he is dying, but the doctors are lying to him. They say he's stable, and they lie to Tony Atlas because they're so afraid of Tony Atlas. Tony Atlas was almost as big as Brody at this time. He's punching holes in the wall because he's so pissed off that they're not attending to Brody. So they tell Atlas he has to leave, and Atlas, I think, goes back to the show, actually, and works the show. And they are lying to him, and they're not telling him the truth that Brody's actually dying. Tony Atlas is talking about how angry he is, and he has... Oh, it pisses me off hearing about this. He goes back and he hears laughter in the locker room when he's back at the show. No one's even buying it. It's like to them, they think it's an angle. A lot of guys, Abdullah the Butcher talked, but he thought it was an angle. Dutch Mantel, I think he's confused at what happened. There's laughter. This is disgusting. Tony Atlas tells the story of back in the locker room. He's yelling at the police officers who are there. They think it's fake too. He's yelling, "It's Jose, it's Jose." All the wrestlers said it was a fan. He's yelling, "It's Jose Gonzalez." And they eventually, there's huge confusion. Atlas is furious. He even grabs a chair. He throws it across the hallway. He is just furious. This story is also crazy. I did not hear this. Tony Atlas was actually wrestling the Iron Sheik that night, and when they're locking up, and Sheik asks Tony, "How's Brody?" and he thinks it's a fan, and he tells him it's Jose, and Sheik loses his mind. He leaves the ring. You can just imagine him swearing. Both of them leave the ring, and someone tells Tony Atlas they're looking for you, and Tony Atlas leaves, and he goes to a beach because he's afraid they're going to fucking kill him. They probably would have, and this is just crazy. Iron Sheik, I didn't know. I would have loved to hear his perspective on what had happened. I haven't really heard Iron Sheik talk about this as much. So as things progress, Dutch Mantel, he's able to get someone to talk to him about Brody, and he's talking to a woman. And actually before that, Carlos Colon's wife is the one who notifies Barbara Goodish, Brody's wife at the time. She notifies her. She tells him it's an accident. And then Dutch Mantel calls her. He tells her it's an accident too. And Dutch Mantel's talking to a receptionist there, and he's asking for an update on Brody. And when she gets the news, she's talking in Spanish, so he doesn't understand. She starts to cry, and he's like, "What's wrong?" And she tells him, "Your friend has passed away." And this stuns him. Tony Atlas finds out from Abdullah the Butcher from a meeting the next day that Brody had passed. Abdullah the Butcher has not come off good here at all. There's a dispute between him and Tony Atlas. Tony Atlas is pissed off at him. So there was a meeting, I believe 100% there was, in a room with pretty much all the American wrestlers of what had happened. And Abdullah's denying this happens. Tony is adamant this did happen. I believe Tony Atlas 100% that this did happen. This meeting, and there's just a huge dispute right now, and people are just stunned. Dutch Mantel tells a story like this. Are they investigating this? A man died. It's out of control right now. There's just so much panic. Abdullah the Butcher is the one who has to break the news to Barbara that her husband Frank Bruiser Brody had passed away, and she's shocked. He just comes off like a complete slime ball here. Does not come off well at all. He probably knew something. I'm not surprised if he knew something, and he's covering his ass. I don't think he was involved in the murder, but Carlos Colon, he's 100% involved. He knows what happened. Jose Gonzalez did it. There's other minority owners who were there. This is just this is a hit job. It's fucking disgusting. I want to see these motherfuckers get what they deserve. It's fucking infuriating watching this bullshit. It's this fucking garbage. Fuck this, you motherfuckers. So this is where it gets really sad. Barbara and Jeff, they're in Puerto Rico. They're in a hotel room and they're just crying and heartbroken. This is horrible. And there's even a situation of Barbara III, like she wants to know, how am I going to get him back to the United States? And she has to cremate him in Puerto Rico, and that's just horrible. Like I don't know what her culture is of how they handle the death. If they cremate you, or they just bury you, or they put you in a tomb or a wall, or whatever. She has to cremate him, and in order to cremate him, she has to do it in Puerto Rico and then take his remains, his ashes, and go back to the United States. This is even more disgusting hearing about this. Tony Atlas was set for a court date because he was a witness of the story, and he was told he'd be contacted. So this is, I don't know how long, a few months later. He's there, away from the situation back in the U.S., and he's told by another wrestler who's there, and he tells them to turn on the news, and they have the news, and they're talking about Puerto Rico. What happened was Jose had gotten off on self-defense, and Tony was never even contacted. Dutch Mantel was also going to have a subpoena, and he had already known the verdict before it even came. And it came in the mail, but the verdict had already been over, and he gets it, and it's already Jose's off on self-defense. Dutch tells a story of, like, people in Puerto Rico, they think wrestling's real. So they see Jose, who's not a big guy, and they see Brody, who's a fucking giant, and they think, oh my God, of course it's self-defense. Jose was able to convince them that it was real, and they think this is 100% real. It's self-defense. Look at Brody, look at Jose. Jose's Puerto Rican, Brody's American. That absolutely plays a role. Don't ever think differently. And this is your result. Jose's off on self-defense. They even show a Carlos Colon shoot interview he did. I think it's RF Video or something, or High Spots, one of those guys who does it, and he's just dodging everything. It's just, this guy is he's a fucking piece of shit. He was in on this too. Fuck Carlos, and fuck the WWE for putting him in the Hall of Fame in 2014. I remember it. I remember not even watching it. I remember Carlito bitching and stuff about his induction. Fuck you and fuck them. And I don't know why his two sons are still employed. That's why WWE is so quiet about this. You never hear him anything. I mean, it's not like they had to take any blame for this, but it's just so fucking horrible. It's just the worst, man. It's fucking bullshit. One thing that's really nice, that's positive, is that a month later, All Japan Pro Wrestling does this massive tribute show, and they invite Barbara and Jeff to it, and they're honored there. It's just, man, that's really classy on All Japan. I really like Brody's son talking about how justice would be great, but personal justice would be great. I wouldn't blame him. I can't imagine in his shoes. I would want to just grab a gun and just fucking go to Jose Gonzalez, knock on his door, and blow his fucking brains out. That's what you need to fucking do. That would be justice. Blow Jose's fucking brains out. Tony Atlas even draws a portrait of Brody. That was a really good moment. So at the end, they show in the credits that both Jose and Carlos were asked to be interviewed, and both declined, obviously, and they won't be a part of this, and hopefully one day we can finally get justice. So this documentary was amazing. This is great. Any wrestling fan needs to watch this. Even if you're not into wrestling, this is a story that'll just blow your mind. This is great. This is fantastic. This is my favorite one they've done so far. The story was great. I thought Barbara did well. I thought Jeff, he did really well. I felt really terrible for him watching this. Tony Atlas was amazing here. He was great. He is so vital to the story. Dutch Mantel did very good as well. Abdullah the Butcher did not come off well at all here. Mick Foley does a very good job narrating too, so everyone involved was really good. This was a fantastic documentary, and it's a must-see. And hopefully one day the Bruiser Brody can finally have justice.